go ahead and just start recording so that I don't forget. Yes, that is my weakness, one of my weaknesses. Oh, great to see you, Jacob. Welcome. Tony. Wow, Tony, you have a full day. He will be presenting this afternoon, I believe. Is that right, Tony?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
with
So
Kim McKernan.
Yeah, so for those of you who are in the room, Tony and Kim McKiernan host a podcast called the Creative Flow Podcast. And how many interviews are you guys at now?
57. We've done
Wow.
57 of these,
Oh,
and
wow.
they are all graduates of the center. Um, so we're never going to be at a loss for guests.
Congratulations. That's really impressive. Yeah, so a real variety of backgrounds with those interviews to see just, how people are. Um,
It's a tremendous patchwork. That's what's so exciting about it is the stories that everybody brings to how they found us and what they're doing with it. It's really a nice it's like a talking history and current doings of what the center's all about. Oral history, I guess, is the word.
yeah, that's really wonderful. And I know you and Kim didn't really get into it with any, particular um I guess, motivations or, or what have you, other than just sort of spreading the word. So that's really, really wonderful.
We both enjoy it. Why we're at it after almost 5 years now.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Wow. Well, feel free to post the Zoom link in
Oh,
the
sure. Hang on. I'll get that. Hang on.
That would be great. Yeah. So that's this afternoon, the next afternoon session. Well, we can go ahead and get started here. So I'm really thrilled to introduce Veronica Scarpolino. Um, uh, yeah, in part because of her tremendous background, but also in part because she comes to us outside of our network. And so I'm so pleased that she found us and will be presenting today. So to give you an idea of her background, she is a recovering artist turned executive and leadership coach, creative thought partner, and founder of Goldfinch Leadership. She helps individuals and organizations navigate change and complexity by developing creative intelligence, the integration of emotional awareness, creative thinking, and strategic action. She is a member of Forefront, powered by Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches Agency, and the author of Second Draft, Write Your Midlife Career with Creative Intelligence. She also created the ICF certification in creative intelligence, which is a capacity building program that equips leadership or which equips leaders, coaches, and human development professionals to think more adaptively, foster innovation, and translate insight into real world impact. So her session will start off with a quick poll, and then we'll do with sort of a pre and post, and then she'll share some of her knowledge, do an experiential exercise, and then we'll also have some time for Q&A. So throughout the session, I invite you to post your questions in the chat, and I will keep track of those to pose after her talk. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Veronica. Again, thank you so much for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Molly, for moderating my session, volunteering your time. And I was saying to Molly before we came on how excited I was to to read her bio and see that she was going to be partnering on the session because of her work in leadership with the school. So it's a really great fit. And thank you all for coming. And for those of you who might be watching this on the replay, this is designed with you in mind too. So please follow along and participate in keeping track of your own poll numbers as we go. Um, and so before we do start, I have a question for you. My question is, how prepared do you feel to think creatively when you're facing complex or uncertain situations? And so you can just rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 3. One being not prepared, two being moderately prepared, and three feeling well prepared. And you can drop that in the chat, and Molly's going to tally those up for us. Um, and being a coach myself, structuring a question is a big piece of making sure that you're really framing things properly. So I did want to make sure that I got a sense of in the room how you're feeling, because I think that will impact the way that I move forward. And so if you all have maybe dropped something in the chat, I'll give Molly a second to get just a general read on how we're doing.
Yeah, so I would say pretty solid response. There were no ones. There were 7 2s and 6 3s.
Wonderful. I did not expect there to be any ones in this room, to be perfectly honest. And maybe you're just because your name is attached to the chat, you didn't want to out yourself, but um, we'll see. We'll see. And so before we get started, I do want to give you a little bit of a more nuanced understanding of um, why I'm here, why I think I should be talking to you about creativity today. And yes, my background that Molly gave was very much accurate. And if you're not muted, if you could mute yourself, that would be really helpful. And I don't know if I'm spotlit. Um, let's see, yeah, I just spotlit myself. There we go. Um, so like Molly said, I consider myself a recovering artist. My original background was in the arts. I went to school for art, was trained in it, but even from a very young age, I identified as an artist. And so you can imagine the heartbreak when in my early 20s, I figured out that I no longer wanted to pursue being a professional artist. A bit of an existential crisis, you can imagine. If I wasn't an artist, who was I? But not really having any other options when I think about what I wanted to surround myself with. I continued to work with people who were being very creative. They themselves were artists, organizations and nonprofits, cultural institutions that contributed to the arts and culture output of the world, and even businesses that had a very strong bend of creativity to them. And through that process, I figured out that what connected all of these different modes of output was creativity. And so I came to recognize that's what I was so interested in when I wanted to be an artist, was the messy process of creating something. And so I replaced my identity from I am an artist to I am creative. And my aperture exploded as far as what I could see as a possibility for my future. Um, I when because I didn't have the academic pathway to creative studies, I did it on my own. And I combined my arts with the capital A with my own arts education and my own research into creativity, neuroscience, mindset, organizational growth, adaptability practice, and through formal coaching. And I was seeing patterns that were showing up in all of these different spheres. And so once I saw these patterns, I also started seeing one other thing, which was the same challenge from domain to domain, is that these very capable people who were facing complexity and challenges would get stuck, regardless of how much knowledge or resources they had at their disposal. And so it made me wonder why, if they're so creative, at least in my eyes, the way that I was thinking of it, why couldn't they get unstuck? What was happening to them? And so over time, I began to understand and formalize what an integration of these different domains could look like. And so I blended my understanding of creativity science and emotional intelligence. I did a lot of work as a coach and as a human, especially through the pandemic, of elevating my own emotional intelligence for myself first, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then how I could help my clients and even my family navigate these really disruptive and anxious times. Um, that combined with the adaptive problem solving that I'd been deeply trained in as a coach, I was seeing an interaction and an interface among these that were not separate domains. It wasn't like here's creativity and here's emotional intelligence and here's your ability to plan and move forward. These things were all interacting together. And so I ended up working from this mindset through my coaching and through the work that I was doing until I began to articulate it, which I did in my book, Second Draft, that Molly mentioned. And once I was able to articulate it, the clarity started coming even more for me, which made me even more interested in studying some of the science and the different modes behind it. And so it does bring together these different research traditions in a practitioner mindset. So that's what you're going to be experiencing is this is all pulled together to see what actually works in the world where I've been working. And so with that in mind, let me bring up for you my slides here. Oops, let's see. I have it on full screen. So there you go. And so what I designed was, what I was envisioning was this movement from these three separate domains that interacted with each other. Your emotional intelligence, your ability to recognize, name, and navigate through your emotions, and how it interfaces with your ability to tap into your creative thinking capacity. And when you could do that better and quicker, how much more efficient you could be getting into your creative thinking capacity. But creative thinking without doing anything can become daydreaming or fantasy. So you had to have an ability to then take your divergent thinking, converge it into action. How do you prioritize which idea to go with? What's the first step? And what happens when you act and it doesn't work the way that you want it to? You have your emotions popping up again, your disappointment, your frustration. If your emotions are in fact signals of data, information that you can use, that allows you to become more curious and head back into your creative thinking. So you're pinging and ponging around through the entire process of creation, from your emotional signal to your expansive thinking about possibilities to the action of making it happen in hopefully an iterative experimental fashion so that failure becomes feedback that you can continue with. It gives you new signals of emotions that, again, bring you back into creative thinking. This dynamism of it, the non-linear aspect of it, is what I found so attractive. It's not a start here, work your way through until you're done. This is a lived experience that you do every day, all day long. And the more you're able to recognize this happening on sort of that metacognition level, the quicker you can catch yourself, become curious, and get into your creative problem solving headspace. Some of us are more inclined to have divergent thinking as our strong suit. So, especially when I work with artists and designers, sometimes they love to stay in ideation mode and they have trouble actually finishing things or even getting them started. So that's why you have to have that ability to, in that metacognition, oh, I'm stuck in ideation. I need to force myself into that convergent thinking of ranking and planning and moving with incremental tiny steps moving forward. On the other hand, I also work with people who are highly analytical thinkers. And if you ask them if they're creative, they will tell you absolutely not. Well, maybe in this way, but not here at work or not in this domain. And that's where I beg to differ because they do have skills that are, in fact, essential in the creative thinking process. So that's the root of this creative intelligence. It's the blending of these three separate domains into a more dynamic interface. It's like your operating system. Although I really, especially nowadays with AI, I've been trying to move away from any sort of analogy to us being computers or any sort of machines because we are not. um, it might have been a useful analogy that was taken way too far. But if it's a metaphor that helps you to picture this and to make it work, then by all means use it. So with this as the underlying root, I'd like to take you through an experience where you can decide what kind of creative thinker you are. And so I designed this mental map. It's non-scientific. This is more from experience and gut, if you will, but a way to think about the different elements that are all necessary to make that creative intelligence dynamism work. And what you see on the screen are five different mental buckets, if you will. We have analytical thinking. We have generative thinking, which in many ways is where I think, the general public tends to bucket creative thinking into that generative section. Relational, practical, and visionary thinking. And without defining anything, I'm going to trust that you have good interpretive skills. And I'd like you to take a look at this mental map. And with a piece of paper, if you can mark down not just the colorful category heads, but which of the specific subcategories do you feel you resonate with, that this is you. You're good at this. And I want you to look across the whole map and pick any place, any of these and all, not, 1, 5, 15, pick as many as are necessary. I'll give you, we can go up to 2 minutes to look at this and write down the ones that you feel resonate for you. Does anybody need more time? Maybe you can use your reactions and raise your hand if you need more time. Okay. Oh, Joyelle, you want to take another couple seconds? Okay, so yes, my vocation is as a coach, so I have some coaching questions for you here. My first question is, when you look at the array of different creative thinking styles that you possess, how many of you have more than one creative thinking style that you feel is one of your strengths? More than one. And I can't see all your hands, but some of you are doing the reaction too, so that's really helpful. Um,
Yeah,
and
it looks like about at least half the group has or is doing the thumbs up or raising their hands.
okay. And so I'd also be curious of you who have more than one um, subcategory that you can relate to. How many of you have more than one colorful category that your skills have shown up in? And maybe that's what people were raising their hands for.
Yeah, it looks pretty consistent. Yeah, probably
Okay.
maybe 60-70%.
Okay.
Mm.
And so when you think about a complex situation that you've been facing recently, which of your creative thinking style strengths do you think you were leaning most heavily into? If you want to drop your answer in the chat. And if we could get just a little sample, if anybody is doing that, that would be great, Molly.
Sure, yeah. Actually it looks like a lot of variety. We have generative and practical, visionary thinking, a combination of all of them, uh, analytical thinking, another combination of all of them, relational and generative, analytical, rational, practical, generative, practical, and relational. Um, yeah, so quite a diverse, diverse.
Right. And what's interesting is that um, it seems like they're not all uniform. Each of you has your own strengths that you're bringing to your complex situations, that you naturally lean on these strengths in times of difficulty. Now, so if you were to think about a similar complex situation where you got stuck and you were not able to figure it out, which thinking style do you think might have been helpful to have that you don't actually have?
Tony said relational. That's interesting. Um, he was very much an extrovert, Tony. Again, relational, analytical, practical thinking, oh, art and music.
So what's interesting here is that you've potentially not really thought about your creativity in this structure before, because you didn't know what I was thinking about to make this map. But to look at it and to see these different thinking styles and in some ways some of these tactics that you do naturally lean into. Imagine if, having not really named it prior, what might that do for you to know that it's there, that you can call upon it when you need it? And what might it mean for you to recognize where maybe you have some gaps in your thinking style strengths? And who do you know who might have those strengths that you could partner with, lean on? Or what tools could you adopt that could help you? Earlier in our keynote, we were talking about AI, and I'm not talking much about it in this scenario, but I do talk about it quite a bit. Um, Using AI to supercharge one of your strengths can keep you stuck in that mindset too long. I don't need help generating ideas. I'm like a little idea machine. And having a brainstorming exercise with ChatGPT is fun, but it gets me nowhere because that's one of my strengths. But having it help me with my more convergent thinking, ranking and planning, what's the first step? What's the first smaller incremental step? Am I still overwhelmed? Well, then what's that first step broken down even more? That is where it became a useful tool for me. And in fact, over time, doing this with a tool like ChatGPT, I got naturally better at these things, recognizing when I was stuck in ideation mode and I needed to shift into a different mode of thinking. And I got better at convergent thinking, which made me feel like these are not personality traits. These are skills. These are things that you can develop and that some of them are habits. And if you've habitually been leaning into some of your creative thinking skills more than others, what would it mean if you were able to intentionally adopt others? So, the reason I call this integrative and why integrating these different mindsets is so important for what I call creative intelligence is because if you can't name it, how can you do it on purpose? That awareness helps you recognize not only your dominant style, but helps you appreciate other people's dominant styles. And accidentally, that's growing your emotional intelligence. Understanding other people is actually part of emotional intelligence. And it also increases your likelihood that you'll be able to flex across these different thinking styles when the situation demands. And they're all necessary. And this is just a couple of examples of, if you were to think of analytically without having any ability to envision the future, it can become a rigid scenario. If you are too stuck in the future envisioning what could be without having practical means to get there, then you get stuck in fantasy. Innovation without relational skills is disconnected, and being practical without having emotional pieces as part of it is mechanical. And so when you think of these pieces all needing to come together, you need to integrate them. And I often think of comedians as a really good example of people who really need to stretch across all of these different domains. And I'll be writing a whole case study on comedians and how they use it as an example of this domain stretching. So I have done a similar exercise that you just did with the creative thinking styles with a group of over 200 coaches recently, actually last month, with the idea of how do you thrive as a coach in the age of AI. And AI and automation was the tip of the iceberg. That was the thing that was most evident. But really, what we were dealing with in these conversations was compounding volatility. And this is just some examples of the things that are creating extra complexity out in our world that requires us to think more creatively in problem solving and navigating. Yet, if you're stuck in emotional overwhelm, how can you solve creatively? And we know from neuroscience that when you're in survival mode, your ability to think about possibilities shrinks because all you're doing is trying to survive. You either fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flock. There's like a bunch of them now that are different stress responses. And so, how do you get out of that? You need to first make sure that you are not dying, and then get curious about what's really happening. And then you can get into your creative thinking. It's part of what we did over that 3 session seminar with the coaches. And what was fascinating was these people were not all US based. We had 20 different states in representation, but we had 18 countries that were also included. So we had people across different languages, cultures, and legal ramifications, different socioeconomic, political scenarios that were participating in this. And what happened through the course of this intervention with the coaches was that we were able to, each session individually and over the arc of the entire seminar, basically eliminate their threat response. Now, that 21% is a combination of feeling overwhelmed and pretty unprepared. And we were able to eliminate the overwhelmed and reduce the feeling not well prepared to 2%, which was really amazing. Session 1 was really focused on the emotional piece of it, with some of the other elements peppered in. Session 2 was really focused on the creative thinking, again with the emotions peppered in. And session 3 was on the strategic experimentation and action. So this was the full arc of it. And today you experienced a couple of the pieces. Well, I also had asked them a similar question to you. How prepared did they feel for the change that was happening? And their prepared numbers jumped significantly over the course of the seminar. And very fascinating because these were people that did not self-identify as being creative coming in per se. Their identity as being creative increased remarkably as well when you brought people who were analytical thinkers into the center of the conversation, not leaving them on the outskirts. So this is also about leading in complexity. What you're doing right now is for yourself. And what I do on a regular basis is not only for myself, but the creative intelligence informed coaching to another. I also do group coaching and help leaders deal with team dynamics, and that's how it can branch out to groups. And then, because groups are more than just the individuals that are in the room, the group itself takes on almost its own identity. And this can again scale out to a system, whether it's a department, an organization, or even a community, because that becomes an even more complex dynamic as well. And this is a graphic that I created for the certification for human development professionals that I run. But I want to show you how just doing this for yourself and imagining how that map could work when you're dealing with another person besides yourself, or even an entire team of people, what that could look like when you think about balancing out the need across the problem solving. So I've done a lot of talking, and now I want to know, now how prepared do you feel to think creatively when you're facing complex or uncertain situations? So how are we doing, Molly?
Yeah, so well, I will say we have a fairly advanced group here. I see a lot of names that I recognize who have, gone through the creativity and change leadership
Put everything on. We'll see if this place has a bathroom.
What
um,
was that?
I think that was just someone who wasn't muted. But
Okay.
let's see, right now we have five threes, two or three twos, and so that's I think we're sort of still at maybe around where we started with, but again, this is I think a fairly advanced group that we have
We
here.
got two more threes that came in after you
Oh,
started
two more threes.
speaking.
Okay, so we have seven threes, and as opposed to when we started out, we had six threes. And someone commented there's a need to study the various thinking styles and learn more about how to use them. And Allison also said, I think creative preparedness is self-awareness, but also strong command of the thinking tools and understanding of the affective skills. Very nice.
One of the things, so by the way, I'm going to drop my LinkedIn if you would like to connect with me, but also if you're interested in those numbers that I was showing, the graphics, I have a case study that I wrote about that seminar. And so you're welcome to also look at what that entails. Um, One of my personal missions is to help others increase their creative identity because when you think about growth mindset, positive psychology, those people who view, and even luck, the work is studies in luck, people who view themselves as creative are more likely to see a setback or an obstacle as an opportunity to flex their creative skills and to figure out how to, they feel empowered to solve this. I can do this. I'm creative. Versus somebody who does not necessarily think of themselves as creative, they're potentially more likely to think of a setback or obstacle as a brick wall, that that's just the way it is. And so the ability to grow your creative thinking self-identity is to me directly connected to your ability to problem solve, to adapt, and to see the constant disruption and volatility in the world as maybe upsetting, but ripe for opportunity. And that's something that I think is just really needed right now. Because without hope, humans, atrophy.
Well, thank you so much, Veronica. That was very insightful. And if you don't mind, I think I'll start us off with questions. I
Yes,
have
please.
this is a bit self-serving, but I have a lot of students who, are interested in going into the space of well-being and creativity and in particular coaching.
Mhm.
And I can sort of speak to like the academic side of well-being and creativity, but less so the sort of applied side. So I'd love to hear maybe a bit about like your journey into getting into the field, or if you have advice for those who would like to get into that space, whether like individual coaching or coaching for organizations. I'd love to hear, yeah, what you have to say about that.
Well, I've met many, 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 many coaches. I'm in some really wonderful communities of other coaches, and a pretty standard personality profile is that we want to help. We're the helpers in the world. We like to problem solve with people, and we like to feel needed. Like self-serving a little bit as well. And if you don't necessarily like helping people, it's probably not a great idea to get into coaching. Yet on the same side, there's a big distinction between coaching, advising, consulting, mentoring, and teaching. There are overlaps among these things, but the skill that you lean into and the agreement that you have with the people you're working with changes depending on which hat you're wearing. And so maybe the first question that your students can ask themselves is, if you were to define each of these five different vocations, uh, which one are you truly attracted to? If you want to be giving advice, coaching isn't necessarily the place that you want to be. If you want to be the one who gets dirty solving the problems, then you probably want to be a consultant. If you're somebody who trusts that the person that you're working with knows themselves and their subject matter domain best, then maybe coaching is where you might want to go. But ultimately, this idea of well-being is, I dropped in the chat when we were in our morning keynote. My master's degree is in social engagement, and I leaned heavily into Carol Riff's model of well-being, and found that it resonated with the different elements that you might need to truly thrive. And I subscribe to the Happiness Report, World Happiness Report, positive different newsletters that talk about positive events that happen in the world. I look for positivity. I look for the things that good people are doing to change the world for the better, because we're wired for threat responses. And the research says that it can take up to 3 positives to counteract the one negative, because the positives don't keep you alive. The negatives do. And so, if you think about, to really butcher quantum physics, if you're not looking at it and you're not measuring it, it doesn't exist. So, looking for the positives is a really helpful way to maintain your own well-being, especially when the habit is doom scrolling.
That was very helpful. Thank you,
You're
Veronica.
welcome.
So any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or ask, post a question in the chat. Um, yeah, Anthony.
Thanks, Molly. Yeah, you could hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Veronica, I did my master's in 2005 from Buff State, and I got to really compliment you.
Oh, thank you.
The whole field of creativity is pretty complex,
Mhm.
and many of my colleagues, it was very difficult for them to be able to put it all together and piece it and put it all together. And for someone that has never been in that field necessarily, the wealth, the knowledge, and I actually would promote the idea that you take a look at our doctorate program. Quite truthfully, I think you'd thoroughly enjoy it just listening to your background. But you've been able to synthesize so much and put concepts together so much that I've not ever seen anybody do going through our program. And not because they don't have the capability, but the field is so complex. There's just so much out there. But you have been able to, like I say, synthesize pieces and parts, which is very, very difficult to be able to do. I mean, many of us just grab on to an area and and want to focus on that area, but you've been able to take a whole big area. And I've been in the consulting field now for 30 years, and you've been able to take a large area and bring it down into concepts that I'd really suggest you take a look at the doctoral program. I think you'd be a prime candidate, quite
Well,
truthfully.
that's the highest order of a compliment. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
If I can say that my chosen field of art, I was a sculptor. I was a found object mixed media sculptor. I would take little bits and pieces of things that were interesting to me and create
All
something new
right.
with them. And I'd argue that I'm still doing it, yet in a different medium now. So that leaves me feeling fulfilled and whole that I didn't actually give up that artistry, that I just am using a different medium. Yeah, but thank you. I'm very
Yeah.
flattered.
No, I'm impressed what you've been able to pull together, quite truthfully.
Tony, I saw,
You've given a different perspective. Yeah.
yeah, well, going to the other Anthony or Tony in the room. I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just put a question in the chat. You have imagination in the name of your session. Can you speak more about that word and toward the varieties of thinking that you shared? And
Mhm.
since you came from making art, how does imagination inform art making and or verse deliberate creativity?
Thank you for that question. I so imagination is a lovely stand-in for creative thinking because imagination requires you to conceive of something that doesn't currently exist, to associate things that don't currently have an association to each other, to combine things in ways that don't make sense. So the imagination is a lovely stand-in for all of the divergent thinking that might be necessary in that generative mindset. Um, the what was the second part of your question? How does it inform art making? So I had done some mental gymnastics to figure out why I gravitated toward coaching. And I was finding these lovely parallels between the training I had as an artist and the training I was getting as a coach. Both require you to challenge assumptions, to see differently, to notice the gaps or the negative space, to notice texture and to notice lighting, to basically take in the world through information and not just say, well, that's just a dog. You know, what is it that you're looking at? And then to say, how am I going to take an idea that I have and find the proper medium in order to put it out in the world where somebody else can see and interact with it so that I can communicate this emotion, this idea, and this feeling to others. And there were some really lovely parallels in considering what you have to do when you're a coach, listening and not making assumptions about what somebody is saying, challenging your assumptions and your client's assumptions, et cetera, et cetera. And so I do see that my art training was a fantastic preemptive strike against learning how to coach properly. And I'm still learning. I
Mhm.
slip into my own excitement modes, and okay, can I share an idea? That's why strategic creative thought partner is one of my many titles, because that's something else that I really enjoy doing.
Thank you.
Well, we are just about at time, unfortunately. I know there are some lingering questions, so I posted Veronica's contact information in the chat. So if you want to follow up with her, I'm sure she'd be happy, I imagine, to respond to those questions. And again,
I
I
see one on serendipity that I just like,
yeah,
oh,
I know.
oh,
I know. It's so fascinating. It's so tempting. Again, Tony and Kim have their session right after this at 1:15. So I encourage you to attend that. I'm sure it will be fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us this afternoon, Veronica, and for being here. And I hope that we see more of you in the future. And thank you all for attending.
thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Hope to see you tomorrow.